and welcome back to another episode of the fourth quarter pod where we're going to chop it up regarding a lot of really interesting, juicy content today. And I know I say that all the time, but this is actually a very spicy conversation that I feel like we're going to get into here. But Jake, how you doing? How's your week?
Good, thanks, Luca. I hope you're doing well. Looking forward to getting into the pod, as you mentioned. Not too many topics, but two or three topics full of substance, which I think we're going to deep dive on. So, without further ado, let's kick into it. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. Let's do it. And I know this is something that we've spoken about a little bit in some of our, chats and whatnot. And a lot of people have a lot of different takes on it. And I just thought, this is going to, I think this might evolve into a slightly philosophical discussion, but we'll keep it within NBA as much as possible. But what are your thoughts? Kyrie, media day, vaccines? I know that's really broad, but take it away for me.
Such a hard conversation to talk about because we could take it so many ways, but I guess, the title of this video is a good place to start. Kyrie being Kyrie, if his history didn't exist, I might take him a little bit more seriously on his stance with the vaccination. Obviously, it's a bit of a hot topic around the world, and even though the vast majority of people are now vaccinated or planning to get vaccinated, Kyrie is one of the minority now that doesn't want to do that, which again is his decision. We had a good conversation earlier in the week about how the Lakers have responded to the vaccine and LeBron coming to the right conclusion, in my opinion, on questioning it, but then ultimately getting it, to keep his family and friends healthy, not to derail the NBA season, and just to do his part for society. So it comes all the way back to Kyrie and a comment that you made about Jake. You can have a freedom of choice, but you can't have a freedom of consequence, which I thought was quite poignant on your part. So that's good chat from you. And here we are, bro. Kyrie Irving, just marring every team he's been on since leaving Cleveland. And I feel bad because that Brooklyn team is looking fantastic. And what's scary about it is they're probably going to do well with or without him. Kyrie's really going to have his feet put to the fire, and his beliefs are going to be challenged because if he doesn't play, he's probably looking at losing 20 to 30 million dollars in game salary. So I don't know. Based on what I've just said, what are your comments around that?
Yeah, it's interesting because on one hand, you are Brooklyn Nets, the organization, and you're looking at this like someone that we've got on a big pay packet who's actually hasn't extended. So this would be his final year or maybe second last year before his player option, or maybe this would be
So,
yeah, so he's on the tail end, and obviously he was up for extension talks. So now you've got this situation where you're thinking about, as Brooklyn, what do we do with Kyrie? He's not going to be able to play half the games. Maybe a team in a situation where that rule doesn't apply might be particularly interested in Kyrie because a lot of states don't mandate that players need to be vaccinated to play in their home games. New York and Golden State being prime examples of that, but then Kyrie's comments around if he gets traded, he's going to retire. So any team interested in maybe picking him up as a player in a trade right now probably doesn't seem likely because they're like, well, if we move some assets for him, we're going to get nothing in return. So his comments are just very interesting to me when it comes up to what his belief and stance is, because those things are just it seems as though he's trying to battle between this idea of he wants to get the bag and he wants to get his money, and that's why he's there. I feel like he's not even there to play basketball anymore. He's there because he makes sub $40 million a year, and that's what's keeping him around. The fact that him getting traded is going to make him retire is pretty wild. And so now he's been put in this position where he's going to miss out on heaps of his bag if he doesn't get vaccinated. So I'm just trying to work out what his priorities are, and then what he's saying to the media, if that makes sense. It all seems confused to me. It seems like he doesn't even actually have a steadfast belief in anything. I don't know. He just he goes with the wind.
without stating the obvious, I don't know Kyrie as a man, and I have no, experience to question him as a man and what he's done off the court in terms of his philanthropy and social justice and all that sort of stuff. But I do question Kyrie in terms of he says a lot of stuff and doesn't follow through with almost anything. So to piggyback on what you said about him being there to grab the bag, at the end of the day, Luka, even if he does get traded to a team where he can play, I'm pretty sure San Francisco has mandated double vax or you can't play. I'm pretty sure Los Angeles have mandated the vaccine to a certain extent. So that's the Clippers, Lakers, and Golden State. New York has mandated the vaccine, sorry. So that's the Knicks and the Nets, which is Kyrie's team. So you're still talking about, at minimum, if he got traded, which he still hasn't because he's on the Nets, at minimum, probably 17 to 20 games. If he stays at Brooklyn, it's 60 to 70, basically the whole season. So if I'm Brooklyn, I'm just holding steadfast and saying, Kyrie, you're entitled to your beliefs, but you cannot play if you don't get vaccinated. If you don't get vaccinated, we can't pay you because this is like a New York State mandate, not a Brooklyn mandate, so that they override us.
Yeah.
And I just think that Kyrie will probably, well, you know what? This is a good time to ask you something. I wrote down a little phrase in my phone, and I want you to answer me. Kyrie Irving, traded, retired, or compliant? Which one will he be?
If I had, oh my God. Okay. I'm going to go with, fuck, I don't know. I'm tossing up between compliant and retired.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. You know what? I'm going to say compliant because to back up what I just said, I don't believe he will hold his word because he said so many different things over his career.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm thinking.
His mood changes like the wind. So I think this is Kyrie with a respectable belief, but having a sense of pride and stubbornness to sort of be on brand with his persona. So I think he's going to be compliant, but it's fascinating. He's already causing drama and the season hasn't already started. He's saying on Zoom, media day that I'll be there for my team. Don't you worry about that. But on day one, he's not even there for his team.
Exactly.
So,
one thing that I just saw in chat from Issa is it not absolutely ridiculous that the players are the only people not being mandated to get vaccinated in the entire NBA? And that's a really good point. Like officials, anybody that works within the arenas, these are all people that obviously need to keep their jobs. They're not paid big money or have earned massive money over their lifetimes. And so there's a lot of mandates being thrown around by the NBA to ensure that the season goes without hiccup. But yet players are not mandated and given the freedom of choice because obviously the NBA is such a pro player sporting association, as we're aware of. And I think, and we'll touch on it later, but we can see pro player gone wild in some recent kind of things happening. But I do find it interesting that they're the only people in the entirety of the NBA that do not need to be mandated to be vaccinated. But even so, I don't necessarily have a problem with that from the perspective of you don't want to, you don't want to rub the Players Association the wrong way and you want to make sure you have a good relationship with them. But it goes back to what you said in that conversation that we had, Jake, where I stand by the fact that, you can have freedom of choice if you're Kyrie being Kyrie or Andrew Wiggins or whoever you are, and you're entitled to whatever opinion, you're entitled to your freedoms and you're entitled to your choice. And if that's the case, that's absolutely fine. But you don't get to choose then, what happens as a result of your choice. The NBA is a business. They need to run. They've said that, these are our rules, or even if it's not the NBA rules, it's the country and state rules that are governing a lot of these things. And, greater society, if you're Kyrie, your opinion to choose and what you want doesn't supersede, the rest of the world and the rest of the league. So I actually don't think it's that ridiculous that they're not being mandated from the perspective of, I think the NBA just wants to make sure that they're aligned with their players' kind of beliefs as a whole, because we know that they're very pro player. But if you don't choose, then you just need to deal with those consequences. And if you don't, then you're just a bit of a loser, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Look, not to make it too personal or political, but I think it's a good little comparison, like speaking of my experience with the vaccine, and this is on a much smaller scale, I came from a bit of a silver spoon perspective. For the last 2 years living in Australia while COVID's been around, or just under 2 years, I've luckily never experienced the illness, or to my knowledge, or I might have been asymptomatic. And I never lost my job in the midst of this 3 to 4 month lockdown in Sydney. And as I'm looking around the landscape and it not looking as grim as I think it should be based on how hard the government's pushing for us all to be vaccinated, I felt a little bit forced and coerced. And Luca, you and I had some friendly discussions around that and just, shared our opinion. The reason I'm talking about this is because it's coming around full circle. I obviously decided in the end, a lot of people are doing it. It seems like the right thing. It's for the greater good of society. It's for the people that, have suffered and will suffer. And this is what I think Kyrie needs to do. Just, have some time to breathe and have some space to himself to make the right decision. And the problem we face here is, let's just say hypothetically, not getting the vaccine is a viable option for Kyrie and for people, and herd immunity will come and all this different type of stuff. The problem we face is you're not going to find that out for at least a couple of years, if not more. So are you prepared to sit out, sacrifice your salary, work out in private, ensure you keep your game to a level where you'll be NBA standard? Obviously, in Kyrie's case, he will. And then when the dust settles on COVID, which, as I said, could be a couple of years, best case scenario, and then in the end, the minority that held out were restricted, didn't do anything with their lives, are finally allowed to do these things. Like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yeah, I
it's
know
not
what you mean.
worth,
Yeah.
it's not worth the wait. So in the end, there are experts who are trying to protect us around the world. And I think Kyrie just needs the right person in his ear, not to force or convince, just to lay it all out, like Rob Pelinka, the Lakers general manager,
Yeah,
has done to his players.
I
So
love that.
just that, I just wanted to bring my personal experience in because, I'm not afraid to talk about it because it's about me. And I think Kyrie needs to sort of have some realization like I did.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great point. Like you're right. He needs the right person in his ear, and like you bring up the Lakers and Pelinka, and I thought that was great. Like, and the story of Bazemore, who was really skeptical at the start, which is totally fine, and then the discussions that he had and the way it was laid out to him was like, think about where you are in your life right now, think about what we can achieve with this team, think about the consequences of doing one or the other. You still have the complete freedom to make your decision, and nobody's pressuring you to make either decision, but just weigh up what your pros and cons are for each and go from there. And I think, yeah, you're right, Kyrie just needs someone like that to be able to talk to him. But I also see here, just again from Issa, the double standard. So either mandate for everybody or for no one. Yeah, I guess so. Like, technically you're right, but like at the end of the day, I think certain parts of the league hold more weight than others. And number one being the players. Without the players, you don't have an NBA. They can find more officials that are vaccinated or find more arena workers that are vaccinated. I'm sure heaps of people lost their jobs that are vaccinated that would be an arena worker. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's just a level of... like, I feel like the organization always kind of walks on glass with players, and for better or for worse, but they're the most integral part of the league. So,
Unfortunately, Issa, like Luca just mentioned, NBA players are in the hyper elite percentage of the world. And for the NBA doesn't exist without the players. So fair or not, there needs to be some level of gray area involved. But as you can see, in cases like Kyrie, Andrew Wiggins in San Francisco, and other players, ultimately, it's going to affect them. And most people are vaccinated. So if we can get 90% vaccinated in the NBA, which is what the current number is, that's pretty fantastic. And we'll deal with the tiny substrata of players who don't want to do it. So I agree, but in reality, it's a little bit more complex, unfortunately.
if they mandated it for players, I'd expect probably that number to be even lower, personally. Like, I don't
Yeah.
even think we'd be around 90%. I think you'd have a like pretty big uproar, significantly worse than what, we're seeing now. So
Yeah.
I think the smart decision was to probably not mandate it for players.
Yeah, definitely.
But whereas the players is something that they can control quite easily, from the perspective of laying down the law. This is how the rules work. But for other staff is a lot harder. I don't think the NBA has their fingers all over that as much as they'd like to be able to. So that's where probably the mandates came in. Like, they can't control team arena stuff.
On a different tone, but same subject, did you see D'Angelo Russell tweet Kyrie is a GOAT after his stance, and his teammate is Karl Anthony Towns, and he lost 7 members to COVID? Jesus, that's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
Jesus Christ. I'm just thinking, like, Towns was, a massive advocate to bring D'Lo to that team, and they're meant to be good buddies, and it's just like out of anywhere in the league, like the most insensitive, place to make that comment. It's just wild.
Hilarious. But I'm interested to see what happens there, because they're supposed to be good friends, and it
Cat's
might be nothing. But
Cat's a pretty sensitive bloke too.
Yeah, like, even if you think Kyrie is the GOAT, as a person, maybe don't publicly state it when you're. Well, look, D'Lo's track record, Iggy Azalea and Nick Young, that was a few years ago. He ruined that marriage, so I guess it's on brand for D'Lo, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. No, we've seen it one too many times from him. What the fuck? D'Lo is great friends with Cat too. Yeah. No, it's cooked. Even if you do think that, maybe reach out to Kyrie privately, or I don't know, whatever it is. Maybe just a bit of concern for your friend who lost nearly all of his family to COVID. But anyway, we'll move on from that.
Luka, shifting gears, and one of my favorite reporters, Brian Windhorst, made an article which I really enjoyed, and the headline was just so perfect, and it encapsulated the entire story. 76ers not paying Ben is a declaration of war between the two. Yep. I don't want to keep talking about Ben Simmons, but it's literally the main topic in the NBA, so we have to talk about it. It's descended into further chaos, descended deep into the depths of hell. Ben Simmons and Rich Paul are just holding out because Ben wants to be gone. And obviously, respectfully, Daryl Morey's not pulling the trigger because he's not going to trade Ben for 50 cents on the dollar. Now, I don't even know where to start with this one. It's just getting worse and worse. Do you have any takes from what you saw from Philadelphia Media Day, from Doc Rivers, Joel Embiid? I've got a couple of takes, but I'll let you sort of open up and I'll work from what you say.
Yeah. I didn't spend too much time really deeply analysing what came out through Media Day because I was a bit burnt out on the Sixers, but I did get some stuff shared with me. Issa, actually, a very passionate Philly fan and heavily involved in all the situation that's going on. I think that initially they started off on the right foot, as an organization. They were really working towards trying to mend the relationship because they knew that Ben was, likely or more than likely going to start the season on the roster. And obviously with him, they're a stronger team, at least in the regular season. We can talk about the playoffs another time, or we already have at length. But they started off on the right foot. They were trying to mend the relationship and trying to make it clear to him that, teammates reaching out, Doc saying the right things. But then it just went south, with how Ben responded, and now Embiid's gone, full frontal attack on Ben, talking about how they got rid of Jimmy because Ben needed the ball in his hands. I thought that comment was just wild, and pretty much that's it. Bridges burned, don't ever come here again.
Wildly true.
Exactly. Very true as well. And so just all these things starting to come out now just means that it's completely irreparable. And the fact that for Ben to get some of that money back and not incur any further fines, he's going to have to, in some way, shape, or form, report back to the team. And unless he's willing to just sit out on millions, I'm just like so baffled by the entire situation. And like originally, and I'll let you take over in a second, but my final kind of comments before we get into discussing it further is, at first I thought like it was very much a shared responsibility, or shared responsibility of blame, I guess, in that, you know, Ben hasn't developed his game, and you know there's been, you know, very clear kind of requests from the team for him to develop his game in a certain way, and he's kind of ignored that. He's kind of been more intrigued with buying cars and, you know, dating supermodels and posting on Instagram and playing video games than, you know, developing a jump shot. But then I also kind of sympathized with, not with Ben, but with, you know, the organization throwing him under the bus a little bit, especially in those, you know, post game. I can't remember, was it game 6 or game 7 that they lost to Atlanta in?
Game 7.
Game 7.
They were up 3-2. No, sorry, they're up 3-1, and they blew a 3-1 lead, I'm pretty sure.
Something like that. So, those post-game comments by Doc saying, I'm not sure if he is the guard they need, Embiid kind of like maybe taken out of context, but indirectly kind of pointing out like specific plays where he felt like things broke down, specifically referencing Ben indirectly, or even taken out of context if so. But at the time it sounded bad, and so Ben didn't respond kindly to that. And then, you know, the organization made it vehemently clear that, you know, this guy's on the trading block, like we want to get rid of him. And as a player, you're like, all right, fuck you, like what should I give you back now? But now that it's evolved the way it has, I just keep putting more and more blame now on Ben. Like the guy is acting like year 19 LeBron after, you know, 2 All-Stars and, you know, a runner-up defensive player of the year. And it's just, mate, it's not on. Like, get over yourself and get back to work. You've been paid to do a job. Do your job until, you know, you find, you know, more likely, you know, trade partner, or alternatively, literally what John Wall and the Houston Rockets are agreeing to. John Wall is getting paid more than Ben, and he's going to be sat until they find a trade partner. And that was because of an agreement between him and the team. The fact that they've dealt the way he's dealt with it is just so childish.
Yeah, you know, my timeline with Ben, Luka, loved him coming out of the draft. We've spoken ad nauseum about me having some premonitions about Philly considering trading one of the two. This is back before Embiid emerged as an MVP candidate and a top 2 big man in the league. Maybe top 3 if you want to throw in Jokic and AD. So it's, yeah, that combination. But anywho, back to the point. Never did I imagine that it would get to this point. The lack of resilience and the weak-mindedness of Ben is outstanding in a negative way. I can't believe what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and what I'm reading. And as I try and say all the time, there's 2 sides to every story. Sure, Philadelphia maybe shouldn't have publicly announced their desire to trade Ben so passionately and so aggressively. But at the same time, if I'm Ben Simmons, 6'10", a multi-millionaire, the unarguably the most talented Australian player of all time, not the best or the favorite because of his shortcomings and lack of success up to this point. If I'm Ben, after passing up that layup or that dunk, beg your pardon, against Atlanta in Game 7 to Matisse for a contested layup, I'd be the hardest person on myself. You know, if I really cared about success and becoming a better player and helping Philadelphia win a championship, I would take all the criticism and then some. You know, I wouldn't appreciate my teammates publicly outing me, and I'd probably have some private chats with Embiid and Doc Rivers. But man, he's either a diva or emotionally weak or a bit of both. But I don't understand, you know, like James Harden gave 8 or 9 years to that Houston franchise. He made Western Conference Finals after Western Conference Finals. And if it wasn't for one of the best teams of all time, if not the best team of all time, the Golden State Warriors iteration with KD, and even pre-KD, he'd probably have a championship or multiple finals appearances. So when time came for Harden to leave, there was a new owner that was, counting his pennies and dollars. The Westbrook experiment obviously had a hard ceiling on it, and Harden had done everything he could up to that point to be the guy for Houston. Now, it might not be fair to compare Ben to Harden, but man, even halfway, like the unwillingness to shoot the ball as it's been documented at nauseum, and
Literally just
Embiid,
shoot it, not even like make
yeah,
them, just like be a threat from the outside, and he wouldn't even put shots up. How many
and
shots
Embiid,
did he take in those final like 3 games of the Atlanta series? Was it like 5 shots in game 7? Like
it was no, it was like 6 shots over 3 games in the
games.
fourth
There you go.
quarter.
It was
Like,
yeah.
yeah, and what Embiid said in that presser recently about all the things Philadelphia did to sacrifice short-term success to appease Simmons, it's not even an unnecessary commentary from Embiid, because in the lead up to that question, he was getting peppered and sort of pressured to sort of say what he thought. And in the end, after a minute and a half of maneuvering and trying to be politically correct, he's like, look, we got rid of Jimmy to put the ball in Ben's hands. We signed Al Horford instead of signing Jimmy to space the floor. We've done everything we can to, make Ben the focal point, and this is how he acts. Like, it's not even a matter of, hey guys, my mental health is really suffering. I want to be traded because I don't like it here anymore. Let's make this as private as possible. I'll show up, I'll punch in, I'll do the work, but please find me a suitor. Like, that's why I'm perplexed. The way he's acting as though he's been there, done that. He's shown his chops in the playoffs, and I'm sick of it, to be honest. And it's a bit repetitive talking about, but we have to because of the commentary and the latest fiasco around it.
Yeah, no, we have to talk about it because I think one thing that really interests me about this whole situation is the fact that what happens here is going to set a precedent for the future in respect to how teams deal with this situation. And the reason why I say how teams deal with this situation is because I feel like more likely than not, this isn't the last we're going to see of these kind of scenarios. Players are now NBA is losing the reins on like its pro player stance because it's just gone out of control. And we're getting to the point where now like Ben's money that he should have been paid is now in an escrow, and then that escrow is going to have fines deducted from it until like he makes some sort of appearance to the team, and then in that case he'll then make his money. And it's just like, does the NBA need to start to get stricter here and give teams more rules and like, conditions in contracts and whatnot to just not pay players for this kind of behavior, increase fines, like just start to give a bit more control back to organizations that probably Philly feels like a little hamstrung in this situation. Like, what do they do when you have this all-star player throwing this kind of tantrum?
And the strange thing is, if I'm an NBA player, which obviously neither of us have experience in that, just the privilege of being able to be paid millions of dollars to be one of the world's best basketball players should be enough for these players. And, being a superstar has its own rules and its own context. But if I'm a superstar and I'm extremely unhappy with my position in a team, you'd think that there'd be so much private discussion that could go on to avoid things like this. Like I said before, just having a chat with the team, and maybe the NBA can come up with some sort of document that can be signed with the franchise and the player, which is basically like a mutual agreement to say, this player wants to be traded. We will do everything in our power to make that happen. Please do not expect the team to sacrifice its, future moving forward to quickly move a player. Like, something like that, where like both sides are understood that the expectation is they're doing their best to find a trade partner. In the meantime, as the player, you have to show up to work. You have to be a contributing member of this roster. And if you don't, then there's financial ramifications. Now, to bring it back to your point, I totally agree. the swing of player, running rampant over a franchise, it's become diabolical, and something has to change. So I really hope that Morey doesn't just bend to Ben Simmons. I really hope Philadelphia do, sort of make the hard decision of not paying him, but the right decision. If it has to go legal, so be it, because someone has to take a stand against this kind of behavior. And the more and more I see the landscape, I really think Daryl Morey's going to hold out. Philly are going to chug along without Ben because, quite frankly, they're still a very talented basketball side. They're not going to win a championship, but I could easily see them being a 4 or 5 seed in a certain scenario. So who knows? Maybe 20 or 30 games in, Simmons is just sitting out. He's copped that 15 to $20 million loss of salary. And then once a team emerges that's willing to offer enough, then he gets moved. That's what I hope happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, and the way things are panning out, that seems to be the most likely situation. I don't think, I did see reports that Indiana have come out as a front runner for a deal involving Simmons. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that kind of deal with Indiana would look like. But yeah, like as you say, I hope Morey goes, you know what, like we're not just going to kind of bend to him and, trade him for, 50 cents on the dollar, as we've been saying. But, withhold the money, go legal if you have to, take a stance against it, set precedent with the NBA, and then, find the right trade partner as, the time it arises. And Issa, rightfully so, says Morey is stubborn enough to hold out against the childishness. I completely agree. I think Morey is probably one of, if not, one of the only GMs that would kind of, there's a few others that I can think of, but definitely is pretty stubborn to not let this go. So
I think Pacers is a good team, and I think it's real. I think it's not just one of those clickbaity reports. Pacers is one of the few teams who would see value in acquiring a star like Ben, because you're obviously never going to trade. Sorry, you're never going to sign a player like that in free agency. And they have a lot of really good, solid players who can help Philly win now without sacrificing their future. Like if you told me off the top of my head, Miles Turner, Karis LeVert, plus a third piece, you name it, Ben Simmons, that would be pretty enticing for both sides. You can keep your core of Sabonis and Brogdon, and you can insert Ben Simmons into that rotation. Given the fact that Sabonis is so multifaceted, he can stretch the floor, and Brogdon's, he's a point guard, but he can play as a shooting guard too, because he likes to take those mid-range jumpers and those 3-point shots. So look, it's all hypothetical at this stage, but I do like that from Brian Windhorst again. I think we might see that happen.
Yeah, no, I actually really do like that take, and I think it would actually be a pretty tantalizing kind of prospect as well, with Ben there, because I think it's a pretty gritty team. They've always kind of played like that, and I think he fits it quite well. And again, like I'm also very interested to see what kind of work Ben actually has been putting into his off season. And the reason I say that is because like he posts all these workout photos and he's working on his game, and it could just be, the same shit that we see, rehashed every off season. Him training jump shots, and then, all of a sudden, come game time, he does nothing. But I do really want to see, after this whole thing blows over and he is with a new team, or which I imagine it will be, won't be Philly, but actually see what kind of work he's put into his game. And I kind of hope there is a bit of a fuck you to Philly. I was just doing all this because you really pissed me off. I don't know. And then he comes out, it's just good for the league, good for Australia, good for fans if he comes back and he's an absolute weapon. And Philly will just be like, yeah, fuck.
I hope so, but I'm honestly genuinely skeptical.
I agree.
I'm not saying that from a subjective standpoint or a biased standpoint. I've seen this dude roll out the same thing every year. And you see me gush, about his defensive prowess, and I love seeing him play when he's on song, but it's few and far between these days, unfortunately, Luka. And I I can't say. I think he's mentally challenged. I think he's really got some block up there
Yeah.
because of what's happened. Maybe the lights have been too bright. Maybe all this bling bling car sort of action is a facade to hide insecurities. I don't know. I don't want to play armchair psychologist, but man, it needs to change. It needs to change soon.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I just wanted to call out one more thing. I saw Issa mentioned in the chat, do you think he'll ever play at the Wells Fargo Center? I honestly feel like at this point he's so mentally brittle that if he took 1 foot in Wells Fargo, with another team, I don't think there's any chance he could deal with what the fans would do to him in Philly.
Oh, no way.
I feel like
might
someone
be
would
a
try and kill him
Kyrie.
if he goes to Pennsylvania.
This might be a Kyrie situation with Boston type thing.
Yeah. Oh.
And there's far less connection with Kyrie to Boston, and they still hated his guts. So can you imagine Ben? Holy, it'll probably be like a LeBron leaving Cleveland on a smaller scale.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, it definitely won't be a good look. Yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty much, I don't want to kill the viewers to death on the Simmons stuff, but I felt like there was a necessity to talk about it, not really from the Simmons perspective, but more so just, around the precedent this sets for the league, and also the fact that we're both just sick of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, moving on, Luca, third topic today, and something I enjoy doing annually, and the first time on a podcast, is talking about the NBA power rankings. Now, obviously, these do vary depending on who you're looking at, like ESPN, The Athletic, Washington Post, but I do like the ESPN iteration of it. They're usually quite good and really professional people behind these lists. So I just wanted to get a few takes from you. If you have anything you like, dislike, maybe we can do a bit of a quick fire, a couple of sentences on each team that you've chosen, and we can just go from there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I did like, just off the bat, Brooklyn Nets being number one in the power rankings. Not too surprising.
How shocking!
Yeah, I do like that they have them there and aren't giving the nod to the reigning finals champions. I think there's a pretty key kind of that's key for me. Like that they're not kind of just paying Milwaukee too much. Them at second is because I feel like they are reigning champions. I actually feel like a lot of teams have improved beyond Milwaukee, to be completely honest with you. I don't know if they're a number two in the power rankings for me, but I'm interested to hear your take on that.
I'm happy to give it to them purely for the fact that the Lakers media day photos have me so worried. LeBron looks like he's a Rogaine beard model. AD looks like he's LeBron's stan, like Eminem's stan, that guy that's just obsessed with
the headband
LeBron.
and afro.
He's got the headband, he's got the beard going, he's looking a bit chonky. I'm not really a fan of that. But Lakers is one of those teams I could genuinely see them vying for one, but then also see them like in a 9 or 10 if things go awry. If Anthony Davis is still Anthony Data Davis and Russell Westbrook is just, Russell Westbrook and he doesn't fit in. And yeah, I'm happy Lakers being 3. I'm happy giving Milwaukee number 2, although I do agree a lot of teams have improved. I just think Giannis might be scratching the surface still, which is really scary. And they've got so much more stability and experience now with guys like Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, DiVincenzo is a nice piece. Brook Lopez is a soldier, as we've spoken about before, just plays so many games and gets through the work. So with that championship pedigree, albeit in a bit of an easier run, I'm a firm believer of you don't apologize when you win a championship, no matter the context. So yeah, I'm happy with Milwaukee there. Starting from the bottom up though, and going in no particular order, just saying that struck my interest was Cleveland Cavaliers at 27. Again, I know it's the Cleveland Cavaliers. I know they're not trying to win, but the additions of guys like Ricky Rubio, drafting Evan Mobley, the backcourt of Sexton and Garland becoming 1 year older and more experienced, paying Jarrett Allen, Kevin Love looking like he's on a bit of a redemption tour and a bit more buy-in back with the team. I could easily see them, fighting for a 10 spot in the East. So
yeah,
I think 27's a little bit low for them. I could
especially
see them around the 20 mark, but yeah.
especially considering like I Cleveland and Detroit are both teams, even Houston, to be honest with you, are all teams that I would have above Minnesota in my power rankings.
Mm, I guess they're just giving love to the fact that Cat has at times been a fringe top 10 player
Yeah.
and they do have talent on the roster. But the firing of Gerson Rosas, as we can see in that little article there, that was very weird. That's just adding to the perplexity that is the Wolves. And yeah, I could pay that. I guess the fact that Carl Anthony Towns, in theory, is like a 30 and 10 monster and he can shoot threes, and if he's available, which he hasn't been for 2 years, they should be in the race for a playoff spot as well. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. We just
yeah,
haven't seen anything from them in so long that I just never have any belief in them. Um,
yeah.
Going from the bottom as well, I also found because I think Sacramento was pretty much on both our radars in terms of a cheeky playing spot potential as a team. And these power rankings are always hard because there's a lot of considerations, and obviously they're probably considering, you know, how do you balance your power rankings by also looking at conferences and such. And it's hard to compare teams outside of conferences because or in different conferences rather, because they're, you know, eventually fighting for different positions to get to the playoffs. But you know, for example, personally, I like Sacramento more than San Antonio,
Mm.
just purely because San Antonio is, you know, this is probably one of Pop's final days, if not maybe his last season. Like, I'm kind of anticipating that, and Becky Hammond to soon take over. And they've,
Yeah.
you know, they drafted in a way that was very, you know, interesting in terms of like they're making it clear that they're trying to build talent, and they went for, you know, the youngest, you know, potentially rawest player in the draft, and they lost anybody that was kind of like particularly relevant on that roster, in DeRozan,
Mm.
and Patty Mills, where you're left with players like DeJounte Murray and Derek White, who are both okay, but I don't know. I don't see them. I'm not as tantalized by their team as much as I am Sacramento. So Sacramento at 24 was maybe not harsh, but I could definitely see them a little higher up.
Well, one spot above San Antonio at 22, New Orleans. I have a question for you. Do you think David Griffin keeps his job next year after this season?
Good question. I think it still largely depends on the season.
Yeah.
I also think that there's something big in store for New Orleans. And what I mean by that is if things just go south again, I honestly feel like everything that they're doing blows up. I see New Orleans potentially relocating, maybe Seattle, maybe Vegas. So I actually think there's bigger repercussions than just Griffin being around. I actually think if things really don't work out here, they might need to really spark something in that franchise and just completely rid themselves of everything that they've associated with and start fresh, because, you know, players like Zion might be on the way out. So I actually think there's pretty big repercussions for how they perform.
I hadn't thought about relocation, but I do agree with you. It's a good point. And Zion doesn't strike me as the type of person to want to be in New Orleans to uplift them, whether it be from the start or because of managerial decisions and approaches to Zion. There seems to be a fakeness about them being on good terms and everything's all good. And I love being in New Orleans. So that's definitely something to watch. It's just such a shame because every year it's like, ooh, Ingram, Zion, formerly Lonzo, they've got such a nice core. Let's add some good pieces around them. And every time I'm just left scratching my head. Last year with the Steven Adams signing, people were trying to say, oh, it's good because he protects Zion. He's a big body. He's a professional. Man, that does not stretch the floor at all. But I digress. I'm very interested to see what happens to New Orleans, but my expectations of them are so low that they'll probably surprise me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm with you. Like, they're at the power rankings, they're at 22. And again, that could be because, you're looking at that triad of Ingram, Zion, Valanciunas, and some decent, peripheral players, but I just don't like what they've done broadly, and they just haven't shown up as they should over the last few seasons, as you say. So yeah,
Yeah.
expectations are overwhelmingly low, and as you say, it's more likely that they're actually going to surprise us with maybe putting together something semi decent.
A team that has moved the most in terms of my initial expectations has been the New York Knicks. You know, at the start, the signings didn't blow me away, but the more that I think about it, the retention of the core, having a coach and a GM in place which vibes with the organization, getting back into the playoffs and having a level of success for New York Knicks standard, I thought was really good for them last year. And Kemba Walker, I know we had a chat about him last week with the SI Top 100. He just looks so refreshed and happy to be in New York. And that's something that shouldn't go unnoticed, because a lot of the time when that is the case, it usually leads to good things. You know, him and Derrick Rose having a really strong relationship, Kemba being from the New York area and coming back home type of thing. And I don't know, I might be buying into the feel good story a little bit too much, but I'm really excited to see them. And I think 14 is a good spot for them. And it's quite astounding because I haven't looked at the rankings, the preseason rankings from last season, but I think New York would have been in the high 20s. So Randall coming into his own, Thibodeau matching the identity of New York, Dolan staying out of the way, and their GM, whose name escapes me at the moment, I do apologize, just pushing all the right buttons and getting the right players. I'm really interested to see where New York can go from here.
Yeah, no, I echo everything you said about the Knicks. I'm really excited. Like, I'm just really happy as an NBA fan that we have a team like the Knicks relevant. It is so big for just NBA fans, for the league, just for, competitions, rivalries, like, those Christmas Day games where, it's at Madison Square Garden, you now are going to be just so exciting to watch, big matchups with, historically Philly, but, maybe that might be a bit underwhelming this season, who knows, but, Boston, I think just the fact that Knicks are relevant is like, makes me super happy. And so more than anything, that's what I'm excited about with the Knicks. So the fact that they're within the 20s is good enough for me. And they're vying for a playoff spot.
What's really sneaky about this season as well, and just to piggyback on what you just said, all the trademark or foundational teams this year are at least respectable, if not really promising. So we've got just, going up the list, Chicago Bulls looking promising. We've got New York Knicks, who we just mentioned, looking fantastic. The Boston Celtics, looking fantastic. Dallas Mavericks are being in it. Golden State, the league's always good when Golden State are performing. Philadelphia, despite all their issues. We've got the Lakers, we've got the Nets, we've got Milwaukee. It's going to be such an exciting season to see some of the most familiar and favorite teams going at it. And, understandably, or, typically, more of the newer franchises or the franchises with the least amount of success seem to be holding down the bottom more so. So this is one of those exciting years where the best teams, the most recognizable traditional teams are looking the best. And I'm excited to see those jerseys being represented the right way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. But I also wanted to get onto a couple of other teams. Well, to be honest, it's two teams actually that have, three rather, that have gotten themselves into the power rankings outside of the top 10. And I wanted to get your thoughts. And respectively, they're at 11, 12, and 13, which is Dallas, the Clippers, and Boston. What do you think of either of those teams finding their way into the top 10 just based on, these rankings?
Okay, so starting from the lowest, Dallas, number 11, or highest, whichever way you look at it, that's understandable. Despite my lofty expectations, Mavericks last year had a couple of issues with coaches and players, most notably the relationship between Rick Carlisle and Luka, and Rick Carlisle and Porzingis. I'm not sure exactly what went down with Doncic and Carlisle, but that was very sour. But I do know for a fact that Porzingis didn't like being a glorified corner spot up shooter. Now, obviously, Porzingis has a lot of things that he has to work on personally as well. But I think with a full off season and a coaching change, we might see the old former Porzingis more than the current one that we've seen of late. And if that happens with Luka being an MVP candidate, I could easily see Dallas sneaking into the top 10. Another reason why they're probably not in the top 10 at the moment is because they're just not one of those teams that a lot of people talk about, despite having Luka on the team. So it's going to really depend on how Jason Kidd imposes himself on the team and what kind of offense he decides to run and if it works.
Yeah.
So they might be a team that slides down a couple of places and I look stupid calling them a 1 seed, or they could be a team that easily rises up. Quickly onto the Clippers, I think this is just merely for the fact that Kawhi is probably not coming back. I'd actually say 12 is a very nice high spot for them. It sort of pays homage to what we saw Paul George do in the playoffs last year, the emergence of Reggie Jackson, that small ball lineup really doing wonders for that team. Ty Lue seemingly fitting in so well with the Clippers, which is good to see. And one of my favorite prospects, Terrence Mann, who I genuinely believe is going to take a quantum leap. So Clippers, I think, is respectable at 12.
I just wanted to add something that I saw newsworthy, I guess, on Kawhi. Apparently his rehab is ahead of schedule. So again, that's maybe just some context to perhaps take into consideration if you're listening out there and weren't expecting a Kawhi Clippers this year, which seems less and less likely to be the case. So we'll probably expect to see him.
Yeah, and to be honest, not to go against that report, I think that's a bit of positive, output from a Clippers insider. Again, he may come back, but I'm guessing Kawhi sits out, the vast majority and maybe sneakily gets back into the playoffs if they make it, which they should.
For the playoffs, yeah.
Yeah, but number 13 is probably the most surprising for me. I think Boston's a team that's really slept on. Last time we had a conversation about it, I forgot guys like Al Horford was on the team. You've got Marcus Smart, Tatum, Brown leading that big three. They definitely should not be taken lightly. Schroeder coming back for that redemption tour, who is a serviceable point guard and is definitely a lot better than what we saw last season. Guys like Josh Richardson, their draftee from a few years ago, Robert Williams III. He's an unbelievable big. So, yeah, I don't know. I've got them in the top 4 of the East, maybe top 5. So 13 is probably a little bit low for my liking, but it's all sort of close together. So it's hard to get too mad at it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's hard with these things because sometimes it is just that, personal preference touch to these lists that changes the order slightly. But yeah, I was also Boston. I was originally quite low on, if you remember our top 10s. Yep. But then, as you say, like it's so easy to slip up on. You look at that record of 36-36, barely making it in. Getting absolutely pummeled by Brooklyn. And then it's easy to forget some of those really actually drastic changes that they made to their roster that are actually very, very nice. So I originally started quite low on Boston, but I'm they're creeping their way up my list slowly but surely. But I guess it would depend heavily on how things actually play out in the season.
It's so easy to forget that Tatum got COVID last year. Kemba Walker was out for the majority of the season, and Marcus Smart had that calf strain. So all those 3 things reversed, Boston probably win 10 more games. And this year, I'm expecting full health, and those additions, like you mentioned, is just going to push them up. And they're one of those teams that people are going to forget to talk about. And this 11, 12, 13 bunch that you asked me to analyze could easily leapfrog Golden State if Klay Thompson doesn't come back, could easily leapfrog Atlanta and Philadelphia if, Philly and the Ben thing doesn't clear up and if Atlanta take a step back. So that 8 to 13, 14 bunch is very fascinating, and I think it's very fluid.
And that's what's so interesting about this season. Like, there's going to be so much battle for those, like, within that kind of area. Like, the top of the table seems pretty kind of set to me, where like maybe some variability in like how you like to see things from 1 to 3, I guess. But yeah, that 4 to 6, 7 range, both in the East and West, is going to be just so exciting, and I think it's going to be like hairs splitting them once we get to those season records.
I think 1 to 7 is locked on this list. So for people that can't see, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Lakers, Phoenix, Utah, Miami, Denver.
Yeah.
I personally would have Atlanta, Golden State, Dallas, Clippers, Boston, and potentially New York over the Philadelphia 76ers at 8.
Yeah.
I'm pretty low on what they can achieve in terms of a high seeding and a deep playoff run. They'll definitely be a playoff team because of Embiid, Tobias Harris, and a lot of good players. But yeah, I personally see them middle of the pack. I wouldn't put them behind Portland only because Portland is nice, but yeah, they're just a semi 500 team who could do better. But that's the range for me, 15, 16 for Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think slowly but surely they just keep slipping because, yeah, and on top of everything that you mentioned, like they're just dealing with a lot of drama as a team. They're going to have to really work together to kind of turn out a good season. And I think the start might be pretty rocky. And those games that you drop are really key.
Mentioning pretty rocky and a bit of a subject change, the Lakers, just for people out there who tune into the Lakers and expect greatness off the bat, please don't. I had to think about my Lakers today, and it's very typical of a LeBron team and very, very typical of a Russell Westbrook integration for a team to suck at the beginning of the season. Now, obviously, the Lakers are a bit of an exception because I'd say they're better than obviously the Rockets and the Wizards, which were Russell Westbrook's last two stops. But if you know anything about LeBron and Russell Westbrook, it takes time. So I could easily see them after 40 games being something like 20-20, which is kind of crazy to say. But after that point, once they've worked it out, once they start turning it up a notch, ripping off 15, 16 wins in a row, losing a couple, another 8 wins in a row, losing a couple, which will then balance out their record. So yeah, just speaking of slow starts, I think Lakers are primed for that.
Yeah, no, that's going to be really interesting to watch and see how that unravels. Because, yeah, as we say, these seedings are so important for how you match up in the playoffs. And, yeah, a rocky start can also lead to a very difficult playoff run.
It's also crazy, just staying on the Lakers for a moment. If Anthony Davis prescribes to playing the five strictly, I think it turns Lakers into 1A to Brooklyn. Now, that might sound a bit blasphemous given how good Brooklyn are and what they've done in the offseason. But can you just imagine, Luca, if LeBron and AD just committed to defending the 4 and 5 and allowing Russell Westbrook to run point, work things out,
Yeah.
and putting two snipers next to that lineup? Like it's, LeBron's not a shooter, traditionally speaking, but he shoots high 30s from three. And last year he was having one of those really, really hot seasons for himself. I think AD will go back up to the mean. So if AD can play the five and stay healthy, and then you've got guys like Dwight Howard and DeAndre break glass in case of emergency, that's a pretty formidable team. But it's all going to depend on health and acceptance of role, which I'm really, really interested to see.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a pretty tough job, you know, coaching that all and managing all those personalities. Like, yeah, I think it's gonna come down to a coaching clinic. But I do like what I saw last year, so I'm pretty confident that they'll work it out.
And dude, you know what? I really tip my cap to Frank Vogel.
Yeah.
I didn't have that much respect for him prior to joining the Lakers. Look, respect's the wrong word. He led those Indiana teams deep into the Eastern Conference playoffs, but I thought he'd be the kind of guy to get walked all over by LeBron. But tell me what you think. I think these last 2 seasons, it's been a Vogel influence rather than a LeBron show. LeBron's really bought into playing defense, playing the Vogel system. And there's a lot of mutual respect, which I didn't expect from LeBron and Vogel.
Yeah, I think so. Like I still remember, and this could be during the Vogel era, but maybe not. But I still remember those clips of Kuzma literally pushing LeBron to go mark someone because he was just walking around. So I can't remember if that was pre.
Luke Walton. Luke Walton.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So there you go.
I want to defend my boy for a moment. Since Vogel's arrived there, he's been an elite defender. And I'm not saying elite loosely. Check the advanced stats, the eye test. LeBron has been locked in defensively. It's I can't believe it because given his age and his style of walking through the regular season, he's just been locked in. So that's where I give Vogel a lot of credit.
Yeah, no, and that's pretty much where I was going. If that's how you answered that question, because I just couldn't remember, then I completely agree. Like the
Yeah.
kind of difference between where he started and how locked in he is now and what he's doing is night and day. And I think he probably lacked the vision and clarity from the Lakers to really understand what was going on and how he was feeling being there at the start. And so now
Yeah.
that they've won a chip, know what they're working towards, know the personnel that he has, I think he's definitely trying to lead by example. So yeah, definitely I echo everything you said there. And I guess just before we wrap up, I want to ask you one question.
Go for it.
What do you anticipate LeBron's season stats to look like this year?
Oof, what a question. The last few years, LeBron's bucked the trend for me. I thought he'd start to wind down a little bit, but whether it be the speed of the game, whether it be the lack of physicality, whether it be LeBron just proving us all wrong, I don't foresee that much of a stat drop off even with Westbrook. I think that Westbrook is in a position where he's very happy in Los Angeles and he'll cede to LeBron and AD to an extent. And I think he'll find LeBron and AD for a lot of good looks before trying to find his offense if he knows his standing in the team. So give me LeBron 23 and a half points, 6.5 rebounds, 7.5 assists. So maybe a slight drop off, but there or thereabouts in terms of what you expect from LeBron, taking into account AD, who can be a 30-point scorer, and Westbrook, who's good for 15, 10, and 10. I reckon he's around that 23 and a half, 6.5, 7.5.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And then follow-up question, putting you on the spot here again. First, second, or third All NBA team?
LeBron,
Yeah.
I'd say first. I think the only time you can't have him first is if he's injured or he's doing an absolute feet up on the desk, sunglasses on, hands behind his head act. So,
With 23 and a half, 6.5, and 7.5, you think he'll be good enough for first All NBA honors versus what you might expect some players playing his position to put up?
I think so. Like for example, KD's guaranteed, and then it comes down to Giannis or LeBron. Kawhi's out of the equation, and I don't know. I can't think of anyone else even vying for that spot. And if Bucks finish second or third, and Lakers finish second or third, such is LeBron James and the name and all that comes with him. I think Giannis would have to average like 35, 15, and 10 or 35, 15, and 7 to do that, and he may. But I just think LeBron will have his fingerprints all over it, as he usually does. And with him, the numbers don't always tell the picture, even though the numbers are immense. So
Yeah.
permitting health and permitting a high participation rate, I could see him being first. And that's what I'm going to stick with for now.
Yeah, nice. I like it. I like that you're sticking with your boy.
Yeah.
I was also, it was a cheeky little challenge at you and your beliefs in players like Tatum, for example. What if Tatum
Yeah.
turns out the season that you kind of potentially expecting from him?
Yeah, I think if he does that, I think he's worthy of a second team for now. Kawhi, Giannis, LeBron, KD are still a couple of steps ahead of him at least. So if Tatum does 30 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, then we're seriously
Yeah.
revisiting this conversation. So we'll see.
Yeah, no. I like the takes and I like that you're sticking with your boy. So
Yeah.
can't knock that. All right, and just one last comment from Issa here before you wrap up. Even if he isn't good enough, the bias will put him there, that's for sure. I mean, yeah, I think with everything LeBron has achieved and, delivered through his career, that even if he puts up a stat line like Jake mentioned, you can't, discredit, the work that he puts in defensively, his impact to the team, where the team would be without him, and also the years of service and years of success as well would give him immediate kind of... just like he's on a little pedestal above Giannis, unless Giannis turns like something we've never seen before in.
And that's what I was alluding to before. I'm not necessarily saying if LeBron's 75% of his former self last season, he deserves the first team. I'm saying if it's a tiebreaker, it's LeBron. Like he has to be clearly second team to be second team, clearly third team to be third team. If it's close and he puts out a legendary season like all the other top players of the league, he gets the tiebreaker. Him
Yeah,
and
no.
Kevin Durant.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Like that's why we saw him. He was a third teamer second or third last year.
He no LeBron.
Yeah, LeBron.
I think he was second, and he was third team when he missed 8 weeks.
That's right.
Him and Blake Griffin snuck onto the third team a couple of seasons ago, which sounds so long ago now, but yeah.
Yeah, you know what surprised me? Just I know we keep going, but like when he missed 8 weeks, he got third team, and KD didn't get third team. KD didn't even get a single All NBA team last year, so I was completely baffled by that. But granted, he did play about half the season. So anyway, like
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I agree. Should be third at the bare minimum.
yeah, exactly. Anyway,
Yeah.
we can ramble on about the disservices the league has done to a variety of different players throughout the years. Last year was full of a few of them.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you, everybody that joined in to watch us live. We really appreciate it. Issa, thanks for chatting. We always love your commentary and chatting with you. Anybody else that's watching, I see there's a few viewers. If you're out there, just throw some comments in. We love to chat with you and get your thoughts, and we can just, talk a bit more organically on some of these topics as well. So if you're ever around and just lurking, do feel free to drop some thoughts and comments in the chat.
Luca wrapped that up nicely tonight, so I won't add too much more. A quick double thanks to Issa from me. That's really appreciated, all that commentary. I was reading all of it, just didn't have time to type and speak. I like the format we ran tonight, a bit more off the cuff, talking about our personal preferences while being objective. And as always, guys, the Fourth Quarter Pod at Instagram, the Fourth Quarter Pod on YouTube. Check out our Apple Podcasts. It's also the Fourth Quarter Pod. We're really appreciating the support. We got a little influx of followings this week, which is great, and we're trying to build this community. And till next time, I think you'll see us next time for the 7 minutes or less segment, which will be in a few days.
Exactly, and we're counting down our approach to the season, so I think we might try and sneak some sort of special in there for you in regards to a countdown to the season. So me and Jake will have to think about something cool we can do for that.
Definitely, and I think the style will change when the season starts. A little bit more specificness in terms of specificness. Is that even a word? Probably not.
We'll make it one.
Yeah, we'll make it a word. It sounds right, and just being more specific on what we're talking about and having a bit more of a structure. Like the daily news rather than weekly news, talking about it in an hour. So yeah, very excited for the season to start, and that's basically it from me, guys.
All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. Good night, y'all. See you next time.
Take care.